and good evening. Thank you for joining us, our fellow lovers of love, on this excursion through the stream of consciousness, down the river of tranquility, and on towards the lake of love.
Yeah.
And it still doesn't work in my head because there's 1, 2 less steps. There should be one more step in that whole journey thing. But I keep screwing it up, so I shortened it to something I could actually get. Anyway, so thank you all for joining us. I'm sorry I was not quite ready, apparently. There it goes. For the show here in my topic list. It's either over there or it's on here. So it's an interesting show tonight. We're having a discussion about sexual histories. Actually, not necessarily about sexual histories, about talking about sexual history. So it's talking about, we're discussing sexual histories. We're not actually discussing
our sexual histories. Yeah.
Specifically, it's about the topic of discussing sexual histories. But, before we get into that, just before the show, a couple hours before the show, I was talking to a friend of mine, making some arrangements for kind of the things we do this week, and his father is passing away. And, these are the type of things you can't control in life. And especially as you get older, it happens more and more often where people have people going through difficult times, whether it's illness or actually passing away. And, a long life doesn't blunt the pain of the moment. I mean, yeah, it can help you get through it, that you're okay, but...
Well, we all know that we're going to lose our parents in our lifetime. We all know this from a young age.
Yeah. But, I don't know. It's just been such a difficult year on that for a lot of people this last year. It's kind of in our face every day. And we forget that, regular things still happen to people. People still, old age, ill health, regular ill health still happens. And we've kind of almost become, I don't want to say numb to it, because it's not really true.
No.
But it feels like it. It feels like as a society we become numb to it. We don't take the time to actually honor the passing anymore. And it's not that the media needs to do it, it's we need to do it. So for all of us, for all of everybody who's dealing with that, we're with you. Love gets us through. The love you have for your loved ones, the love they have for you, that's what you want to focus on. That's what you try to remember. We're not perfect. None of us are. We all have our ups and downs. But at the end of the day, that's what counts. Who loves you? Forgiveness, acceptance, empathy. That's what love is. All this other stuff is just stuff. It can be worked through. I think there's value to that. I don't know. So I was hoping to have a little bit better attitude today. So I'll try to pick up my, it was only a couple hours before showtime. These things. I'm a bit of a softie. So, but before we get too much started, you can please do the follow, like, subscribe thing. We would appreciate it. You can find us on Facebook at The Late Night Love and at Late Night Love everywhere else. You can also find us at our website at latenightLove.us or latenightLove.us. That's another way to think about it.
I like it.
latenightLove.us instead of .us. Late Night Love Us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is kind of if you think of it that way, put the dot in there. Late night love us. Oh, love us, please. Love us, please. Love me. Sorry.
You are so goofy.
I'm goofy. All right. You said you were ready for tonight's show.
Yes, I am.
Because we've got.
I did my research.
You did your research and.
Yes.
Why did that come up? So, all right, hold on. There we go. I don't know. A website I didn't type in came up on my browser there. So we've got on first of all, we were talking about sexual histories, and this is just interesting conversation we were having the other day. Well, I guess it wasn't up the other day now. It was a while. It was almost last week. It was just after the last week's show, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
We were just kind of chatting about that we're not all that interested in discussing sexual histories at this point.
Well, I am and I'm not. I'm very torn. I want to know. It's like you have these secrets, but I don't want to know because I know some things and I compare myself.
Well, see, because that's the problem with knowing too much, right? You want to know about sexual histories, because STDs and all that kind of thing. So there's a point you want to know about, but how much do you really want to know? It becomes an interesting question. How many actual details? Because, again, the pictures in people's heads can run wild, and you might not be that, at that stage of your sexuality anymore. You might have been in a much more or less adventurous stage of your sexuality. We all ebb and flow throughout the course of our lives. We explore things and we find things we do like for a while, and then, they're not interesting anymore. And, these things happen, right? It's just, life is like that sometimes. You're not always the same way throughout life.
That's true.
And so how much of, sexual history is relevant? Especially if you're in a monogamous relationship and, you have one type of sexuality when you're footloose and fancy free and another type when you're in a monogamous relationship. So they're not actually comparable. Yeah. Bisexual people have that particular, I won't say it's a problem, have that particular issue. How do you understand that?
Well, I've dated women. When I was single, I explored, and I would choose one or the other. I would date women for a while, then I'd date men for a while. I wouldn't mix and match because the creatures are so different. But for a long-term relationship, I prefer men.
Yeah, but that's actually my point. In a long-term relationship, your sexuality can be, not necessarily is, can be, depending upon the period of your life, be different. Right? If you're just looking for, a couple months of summer fling, then maybe it doesn't matter the sexuality of the person involved. But if you're looking for a long-term relationship, then maybe it does. And so how much of that sexual history do you relate to? How much of the details? We're not talking about, yes, generically speaking, this is the type of activity I have done in the past. But how much of the details do you actually need to know or even want to know? That's how open-minded and accepting are we all generally actually when it comes down to it?
Well, some people are into that thing.
Yeah, some people, but again, it kind of depends, and it depends where you are. And also, when you get older, into your 40s, 50s, and 60s, how much, there has to be some kind of filter at some point, right? Unless you Mr. and Mrs. Goody Two Shoes, and haven't done very much in your life.
Well, there's, when you get older, there's a kind of a lot to discuss. Do you really want to sit down and give a story? I mean, come on.
I'm not even that interested in my sexual history, but do I really have to go through it? Do I really? I mean, I will if you want. But
okay, so what do you share? You share your number.
I don't know. Some people don't even bother keeping a number. It's like, I didn't keep a number. I don't know. I don't notch my belt. I have,
Oh, ballpark.
No, I really don't. But that's because of the, I don't know, unremembered weekends. But that's a whole nother issue. That, my friend, is a whole nother issue. But that's the point, unremembered weekends. How do you discuss those? How do you deal with all that kind of thing? And we also have to be clear, there's lots of people who don't have a long, sordid sexual history. There's plenty of people out there who, very lucky to have some sexual history to discuss. And maybe it's a bit embarrassing to say I don't have much of a sexual history to discuss, especially early on. Maybe it's harder for men, I suppose, than women, but it still exists.
That's attractive, though.
Is it?
Yeah.
If you're a 50-year-old woman, do you really want to go through the hassle of learning, teaching somebody and going through that really 40, 50-year-old woman? Do you really want somebody who has no idea what they're doing?
Some people like that.
Well, yeah, some people, but I'm talking generically. That's all nice and fun, in your 20s. That's great.
Well, it depends. How long did those relationships last? Did they last for 2 years? Sure, then you have some experience. So what's the problem?
Yeah.
Do you have some experience getting to know a woman? Do you know how to get to know a woman?
Well, you clearly don't. There's a growing number of 30-year-old people who don't know how to relate with the opposite sex or their own sex. They don't know how to sexually relate to people. Let's put it that way. To be all-encompassing, because this is true. There's a growing number of people who have been socially isolated by their own choice, their own social incompetence, or social awkwardness, whatever it may be. What happens? You're essentially having what used to happen in your late teens and 20s are happening in your 30s. And how do you discuss that? I think that's a harder question than trying to figure out how to discuss your sordid sexual history. Because if you're with someone, two people who have long sexual histories, well, you're going to have to accept that, I have a long sexual history, you have a long sexual history. Therefore, it's easier to accept the fact that, people have long sexual histories. But what do you get when one person has a long, complicated sexual history and one person has essentially none? Or what if their only sexual history is paid? How do you discuss that?
Very carefully.
I have no problem with sex work, but it's a hard thing to discuss.
Yes, it is a hard thing to discuss.
Especially if it was, just to get you through some lonely times and not your actual job or something. I think it'd probably be easier to discuss it as your job than it would be to discuss it as a customer. It's easier to admit you're a porn actress or actor than it is to admit that you're a reviewer. It is. How do we discuss all these things in life? How you discuss these things with your partner. No one tells us. And we're not actually helping. We're not telling anybody how to do it either. But the thing is, what we are doing is that there is no way to do it. You just have to find some way to start doing it. And you do it with kindness and compassion. And you figure out, okay, how much do you actually really need to want to know? How much does your internal brain run away with its own motion pictures? And if you have a problem with that, then you probably don't want to know more than you need to. You know. But I think the question is figure out how much you really need to know before you start having that question, answering that question. And work backwards from there. Because there is a point, there is somewhat you need to know, right? There is a need to know. There are needs to know. There also are needs to share. There are parts of your sexuality that you need to share, right? Otherwise, you don't feel complete. Even if you don't participate in them, you may need to share that this was part of me, this is part of me, in order to feel whole, in order to feel accepted. So there is a need to know and there is a need to share. Those are the two parts of the conversation. Right? What do I need to know from them and what do I need to share with them? You know, and you have to understand what both of those are for yourself. And then give your partner time to figure that out for themselves. A lot of times where one person is ready to have the conversation, you dump it on the other person, you don't give them time to get ready to have the conversation. If you're in a long-term relationship, it can be a long-term conversation.
Or a short one. All you get is okay.
Well, the first time, it's all might you get. Okay, can I think about it? Let me consider it. Let me contemplate. They might not have contemplated it in this kind of formula, right?
I hadn't thought about that.
They might not know what they need to share, what they need. They may not know. They may need to work through it, and it's an opportunity to work through it together. But don't try to have the conversation faster than it can naturally, organically happen. Plant seeds, you water it every now and again, and essentially something beautiful may grow from it. You may get weeds, but some weeds are good to smoke. You deal with it. You work with what you get, right? But that's the part of building a relationship. I think, anyway.
Yes.
And so, no, you're not going to get 5-point plans from us. That's not how we work. If you take these 10 steps, no.
An emotional response.
No, and it's okay to have an emotional response, but it's also okay for that emotional response to pass by and to have your real response. Because they're not always the same thing. Your emotional response and your real response are not always the same thing. I think we need to be more careful about that. In our personal lives and how we interact with society and everything else. So many of us seem to be, what's the word I'm looking for? In love with our own emotions, shall we say, that we forget that emotions can lead us astray. That there's a reason we have emotions and logic. You honor both of them, and that's how you get up with something solid and real. It's not one or the other, it's both. It's both. Because we are humans. We are emotional creatures. We make decisions for emotional reasons. Oftentimes they're bad decisions because we didn't logic our way through them and find out the better pathway. Because, being pure logic, also ignoring the emotion side of humans doesn't help either because we're emotional creatures. So you need to honor both. And that's the trick at getting through the discussion of sexual histories. One, it's not a short-term discussion. It's a long-term discussion. and to honor both the logic and the emotions of it. And you do that with love, empathy, and understanding, you'll manage. You'll manage. And you'll manage your way. Not mine, not anybody else's. Do it your way. Okay, so this was an interesting one that you came up with. You sent us earlier in the week. But I do have one caveat right off the top that I wanted to discuss.
What?
This article we used is focused on women when, quite frankly, I think in the modern world, I don't think it matters what gender you are or not. I think this is a universal problem, a universal issue. And if we ever want to get past these issues of, gender disconnection, shall we say, the divide between genders and divide between our cultures, we have to start dealing with these things as universal issues. And I get it. I don't want to be upset at the person who writes it. They write from their perspective, and I respect it. It's just, it's as a general rule for the rest of us. When we talk about this, we should think about it as a universal issue, not a gender issue. That's all. I understand the author writes from their perspective, and I honor that. I'm just saying, from my perspective, I would like to make a discussion from a universal perspective. That's all. Because otherwise than that, it's actually fairly good. I don't really have a disagreement. I just think in the modern age, we should use,
You're right.
Because these things are no longer women's issues, they're human issues. Okay. So what do we got on this one?
It's called In Between Parenting is the latest identity crisis women are negotiating. So we would say, actually, the point they're talking about is working from home. So I can see your point. I mean, a lot of men work from home.
Now, a lot of everybody's working from home.
Yeah.
And now with, issues with the schools and issues with, how working and mandates, and we won't discuss good or badness of those things, but the shift where men were no longer being the main breadwinner had already happened. It's already happening in major cities. Women make more money than men. The average woman makes more money than the average man. It's already kind of starting to flip. But, and then we do this now, we're all working from home. Well, many people are working from home. Many people are doing their own thing now. They're starting their own businesses. They're working 2 or 3. I don't even want to say part-time jobs, because jobs is the wrong way to describe, they're actually running their own businesses. They just don't think of it that way. They have 3 or 4 clients that they work for. And they think they have 3 or 4 employers, but they really have 3 or 4 clients. And they just have, there's not that mental shift yet that I'm in control of my own schedule. I am an independent contractor. I'm not an employee. But more and more people are becoming independent contractors or becoming their own bosses, becoming their own employers. And it's the same issues. Clients are actually harder to service than bosses in many ways. You can tell your boss, I'm off the clock. How do you tell your client you're off the clock? If your boss wants you on the clock, he's going to have to pay you time and a half. How do you tell your client? Drawing the boundaries with your clients it's a whole different task. And then you have boundaries and your life balance as well you have to navigate. Okay, and it's not a gender issue, but sorry, I interrupted. I've been on a slight rant.
Oh, it's a little tangent.
Apologize. What?
But the issue she was talking about was basically dividing your attention between your work responsibilities and your household responsibilities. And feeling torn and the balancing act that you have to do every day.
Yeah,
And not feeling like you're there for either one.
yeah. But how is that any different than the farmer was back in the day? Except you don't do it by Zoom meetings. You have to decide when you're going into town or whatever, go to market. I don't think it's that much different. I just think we became disconnected from that for a little while. That is most of normal life. We've all had to do it. I've never not had to do it in my life. Sometimes it changes focus, but when you have kids, you're always feeling torn about that work-life balance, whether you're in the house or not. How do you take your kids to a doctor's appointment when your office hours and the doctor's office hours are the same? It's the same choices. It's the same issues. The issues haven't changed, but how we frame them as. If we frame them as a problem, we're going to see them as a problem. There's a nasty habit, and I'm not disagreeing. I'm going to, again, maybe it's just my mindset because, like I said, I was probably in a bit doomy and gloomy mindset when I hit the show today. So that's why I told everybody at the start. Just to kind of beware that I may end up slipping into this negative Nelly mindset thing. Because they actually make good points on this. Because she's saying she's distracted by the kids and the stuff while she's in a Zoom meeting. But that's just, I bet you're not as distracted as you think. I mean, we sit here and record this in my home studio. I record a TV show in my home studio, which we're supposed to be back into the regular studio in December.
Oh, it's December now.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not holding my breath. But, and I like being in the studio, so I can understand it, but it's not because of the lack of the distractions or anything else. It's just there's a difference with being in a real TV studio as there is making do in your home studio.
Oh, yeah.
And what's funny is I can get almost as high quality here as I can there. Almost. If I tried a little harder, I could. But there's something different about the 3 cameras, the big thing, the control room over there, an actual floor director, and all I have to do is focus on being a TV host rather than being the TV host, clicking buttons, running the thing, making sure the stream is working, checking for comments, all the various things that we do. And so there is a difference. I understand that there's a difference. You're, in a Zoom meeting, you're not just working, right? You're also managing this Zoom program, checking the Zoom chat thing. You've got to make sure the dog comes. Maybe the guy who comes to fix the heater or check on your HVAC system rings the doorbell just as you start your meeting, because of course they do. And all this is very true, and in that sense, it's easier to work at an office. You don't have to deal with those things, except you do. They're just different. The janitor comes in to empty the trash cans. The water guy comes in and drops the water bottle all over the place. The printer's not printing. Jane is missing, so you've got her work to do that day. And it's all the same. It's just different. We're used to the other distractions. We're used to the work distraction. We're not used to the child distractions, and we do feel a little more. What's the word I'm looking for? Responsible for our children than we do for our job, or we should. anyway. So when you hear your child out there and you're trying to listen to your Zoom meeting, you hear your children outside playing, and you get one of those screams that's halfway between a laugh and halfway between a cry, and you just peek your head out the window to see which one it is, and you can't really do that, you know. So you wait for the next step to see if it's something you actually need to go, yeah, these are difficult things. So Lubby's gonna step out. I'm gonna keep yakking. So we will be right. So she'll be right back. And let's see, what do we need to yak about while the Lubby Nader is gone? Let's see what we got. We've got on the second half of the show, we've got a user's guide to good therapy. And we're not actually going to we're not going to run over the 7 criteria. We may do it quickly. We'll spend a few minutes doing that. And then we've got questions. Oh, do we have some questions? We're actually short questions, but I think they're going to be longer answers this week. And speaking of questions, if you'd like to send us questions, you can do that at, wait, where is my mouse? There it is. At Lubby at latenightlove.us. Man, my mouth isn't working today. And you can find me at JazzRec on Twitter, as you can see on the screen. You can find us at Late Night Love on your favorite podcast networks. And if you can't find us, let me know and I'll get us listed on there. And you can always find us at Late Night Love on the various social media networks. All right, as the Lubby comes back. And we are back. All right, Lubby. So, was there anything that I went completely off the rails on that topic? So, is there anything else you wanted to finish before we move on?
No, I don't.
Or you're just afraid that I'm just going to go negative Nelly on the rest of it anyway? So, what the heck?
No, I thought you covered it very well. You brought up a lot of very interesting issues.
But there is one more issue that I'd actually want to cover, because there is the emotion behind it. We're sitting here talking about the logic and emotion. Balancing logic and emotion. But that's essentially what they're talking about in the article, is how do you balance that emotion? Because it's real. They're talking about the guilt. And I suspect women have more of an issue with this than men do, about feeling guilty. It's not that men don't, I just think women feel it more. Men feel guilty, trust me, we do, about working too much and whatnot. But society tamps that down on us because that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to. And so it kind of tamps down that feeling of guilt, because it balances out with, well, I feel guilty about it, but it's what society tells me I'm supposed to do. So, and so that tamps down that guilt a little. Whether it's good or bad or indifferent, I don't know, but I think it's what it does.
And society tells us we're always supposed to be there.
And society tells women they're supposed to be the nurturing kind and homemaker type. And what's that do if you're on the opposite end? What's that do if you're a man who wants to be a homemaker and you're a woman who wants to be a career person, right? Now, you say, oh, well, it's great. They find together and a man's a homemaker, a woman's but society doesn't like that when they see it. For some reason. It's perfectly fine the other way around. But society doesn't like it when you're just two people who match. Create a good match, create a good coupling. A lot of times that's what it is. A high-powered person needs to find a homebody, a home person, that creates the balance. And two people who are kind of average people, those people get together and and have successful relationships. It's the ones that have a high-powered person and someone who kind of wants a career and a home life, but just kind of a quasi-successful both of them. Not them both. A person who wants a really successful home life or someone who wants a really successful. Anyway, I think I'm going off the rails again. Is balance. The balance in kind of maintaining the emotion. But speaking, honoring the emotion, maintaining the emotion, honoring the emotion. Man, I'm struggling today. All right, so let's skip to the 7 criteria for good therapy real quick, because we're actually experienced at this. So there is actually a trick. I don't want to say a trick to get therapy. But that is remembering that the therapy is for you, not for your therapist. You pay them. And so the relationship with your therapy, I'm less concerned about the style of your therapist, is that the therapist actually works for you. They talk Freudian therapy and all this kind of different therapist styles. Now, someone who you connect with on a emotional level. Therapy is not it's almost an instinctive trust for it to be successful. Now, I've been lucky. I've had the same therapist for a long time now.
And I can't get a therapist to save my life.
Yeah, no, that's Kaiser. That's the problem with Kaiser. They're getting in trouble for that again.
I get a counselor for about a year, and then that's it. They move on, new program. They start doing something else, and they start with a new counselor.
Yeah, so you just getting a therapist, let alone getting to choose one you like. But what you talk about is it's not just the style of therapy. It's things like how they dress, the way their office is laid out, all the various subconscious things that make you comfortable. My therapist reminds me of a grandma. I think this is probably one of the reasons why I'm comfortable talking to her. Kindly grandma, I suspect that it's one of the reasons why I'm more comfortable talking to her than I would be saying a jolly old man. I suspect that there's something to it. Now, at least initially, now we have a long working relationship. But at the start, to get through that hard part, maybe, I don't know. I've never actually thought about it until I actually read the article. But there might be some subconscious factors at play. Maybe someone reminds you of your grandma, so therefore you're more willing to be open to having discussions that you wouldn't be. It's an interesting concept. Think about it. Individuality, uniqueness of the therapist, psychopathology, consistency, especially if you're dealing with things like PTSD, or anxiety, bipolar, someone who you know is going to be consistent. I suppose, even though I'm not sure what consistent means in terms of therapy. So, but at least someone who because consistent and then adaptability. You're starting, these people start confusing themselves again. I mean, yes, you want them to be adaptable. You don't want them to be
adaptability in the therapy. It says a therapist who has a big toolbox and isn't afraid to use it is crucial.
Yeah, you don't want someone who's essentially a one-trick pony. You don't want someone who's phoning it in. It's got one style, they got one things, and you've got to fit there.
I like the ones who have a book. First, you start out by reading that book. No, thank you.
My therapist has a book.
Yeah, but did she require it at your first meeting?
No. Yeah, not at all. Didn't have to buy a book or nothing. No, didn't even give them. No. I have one somewhere, but I haven't actually read it. It's like getting along with your adult children, but I get along with my adult children. So, anyway.
Creativity.
Yeah, creativity. Someone who can think outside the box. Someone who can humanity. That's for mine. Someone again who shares your vision of humanity. Your not necessarily has an carbon copy of your of humanity, or the solutions to your humanity may be different. The paths to the end game may be different, but the basic shared humanity is similar. Your shared values on human rights are somewhat in the same ballpark. You know, the paths to them may be different, maybe vastly different, but at least you both want relatively the same world. Humility, someone who's able to admit the wrong, don't know, willing to listen to you and learn. But what's actually interesting about that? All those are the same thing you want out of any relationship. Any functional relationship has all of those in it. Whether it's therapy, partner, business partner, friend. Those are traits of a good relationship. And that's what good therapy is. It's a good relationship. So remember that and honor that. You'll have a good therapy experience. Well,
Good advice.
And you can work on having a good therapy experience, because I also want to remind everybody that therapy is often painful.
Well, yes, it's a growth process, and growth is often painful.
It's often painful, and especially those initial 6, 10, whatever it is, those initial 6 months, 10 meetings, whatever, those first growth steps, because you got to break habits before you can form new ones. You've got to break thought processes. It's thought habits you're breaking, not personal habits. It's thought habits you're trying to break. That, my friend, nothing can hurt you more than your own brain. Just remember that. And so, and your therapist is there to help you not hurt yourself. That's their job in the process, but it's still going to hurt. It's still going to be painful, but long term, it's going to be worth it. So I just always tell people about that. It's not a magic pill. You don't go to therapy and you feel better the next day. It's not how it works. I often feel crappier the next day. Well, not anymore, but I used to. You have some of these therapy sessions are hard. They're difficult, and then you can carry on to the next day. They can be triggering, to use a word I dislike. But sometimes you have to hit that trigger a few times before you can work your way through it. And that is the ultimate goal, is learning how to work your way through it, not avoiding it. Avoiding it's what got you into therapy. I'll almost guarantee it. You're learning how to deal with it. You're learning how to become stronger in the face of it. You're not learning how to avoid your triggers. You're not learning how to avoid your pain. You're learning how to deal with your pain. Learn how to become stronger in the face of it. That's your goal. All right, so let's hit these questions while we got 15 minutes, because I've been yakking my butt off today. All right.
My boss is divorced and has been bringing his 4-year-old twins into the office due to childcare issues. He goes into meetings, leaves the kids in his office, and they run around disrupting people trying to work. How would you handle it?
Okay. That's a difficult one, because it's your boss. And, depending upon your boss, is he like the owner of the company? If he's the owner of the company, there's really not much you can do. There's probably not much you should do. Now, if you can, you might want to let them know that, when you go into these meetings, these kids kind of run wild. Is there something we can do? But on the plus side, He's recently divorced. He's working his way through some problems, and he's the boss. He knows it's disruptive. He's not stupid. Doesn't have anything to. But there's no other options right now. And in the comments where I got this, I pulled this off of Quora. Someone suggested, so you might want to be a bit more empathetic because now when you have a family issue, he's more likely to be sympathetic to your issues. He's sitting here dealing with them himself. So if he was, you may want to remember that this may work to your advantage in the future, and you may want to be quiet. I mean, I get that 4-year-old children running around an office can be annoying. I actually do understand that. I've raised 5 kids. I do know. But I don't know. There's just not much you can do if it's your boss. I mean, I suppose if your boss has a boss, but it doesn't sound like your boss has a boss. It feels like your boss is the boss. And if your boss is the boss, all you're going to do if you approach it in anything but the most tactful way possible is get yourself on the doghouse list. You become a problem when he's got enough problems. I'm not saying offering to help or anything. I'm not saying to do that. I'm just saying to don't make it your problem if it doesn't have to be. He'll solve it on his own. These things are generally temporary while they're looking for childcare options. They're trying to figure it out. Yeah. It's not easy to find childcare for 4-year-old twins. And single fathers are a rare thing. You don't have much support. The world is built for single mothers. All the support networks we have in place are designed for single men can access them, but it's awkward and it's difficult. They're not designed for it. They're just, and rightfully so. You design it for the mass. You don't design it for the exception. But it's becoming less and less an exception. And until we start accepting that, it's for us to be compassionate with the men doing that just the same way as it had been if it had been a single mother all of a sudden taking care of 2 twins by herself. You'd want us to show her compassion. Show him some compassion. They'll work through it. Try and let it work through it. If it doesn't go, if it continues on for a couple of weeks, bring up say, is there something we can do while you're in? Just make it while you're in the meeting. Don't make it about bringing the kids into the office. Just say while you're in meetings, is there something we can do about them running around causing problems? Don't make it about the whole big issue. Make it about the actual meeting. All right, what's next?
Did teenagers go further than just kissing in cars in the 50s and 60s?
Well, there's teenagers, right? There's teenagers, and the car was just, it's like behind the barn or in the haystack or whatever it was in the generations previous. It just means they were more mobile. That's all it means. Their teenagers are still teenagers. But so yes, teenagers went farther in the back of cars. It's not.
Yeah, what was that thing they'd say they'd go watch the submarine races?
I don't know.
In Happy Days, yeah. Go up to the lake, make out. Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, humans are still humans. They're no different.
Steam up the windows.
They weren't more, they weren't more prudish back then. We think they were, but they weren't. Now, before antibiotics, you had to be much more careful. the invention of antibiotics and, STDs, the whole 9 yards. You could kill yourself sleeping around in the 1800s previously. I mean, you can do it today, don't get me wrong, but it was much easier to do it back then. And so that actually did put a damper. That's the real reason that, religions and whatnot didn't want people sleeping around. Didn't really care about the morality of it. It's that you could wipe out a whole freaking town. You could wipe out a whole culture, a whole civilization by having a loose moral. That's what the whole Sodom and Gomorrah story is really about. Now, we have antibiotics now, so we can foot loose and fancy free and all that, but still, yes, teenagers. Teenagers are always teenagers. We're literally programmed at that age to want to. So it's just nature programmed us, man. There's nothing we can do about it except try to balance the emotion and logic. All right, what do you got?
How do I react to my 22-year-old son who doesn't buy gifts or even a card for family birthdays or Mother's Day? Good luck.
Well, he's 22. He probably doesn't have money. There is that.
Yeah.
The choice is that he's 22. He likely doesn't have money. And, so have a little compassion on that case. Now, if he does have money and isn't doing it, maybe he just doesn't celebrate holidays. There's lots of people who don't celebrate holidays. I'm not a particular fan of celebrating holidays.
You buy me a birthday card?
Yeah.
Sometimes I get flowers.
But I don't do it for the holidays.
Oh, no.
No. So, he may just stop. And here's the thing. If he's not buying things, he's not going to mind if you don't buy him presents. If it's because he doesn't celebrate holidays, he's not going to mind. Because he doesn't celebrate a holiday. He's accepting them because it gives you pleasure to give him presents. Right? That's why you give someone gifts. You don't give it because you expect something in return. You give a gift because it gives you pleasure to give a gift. That's why you give a gift. If you give a gift expecting a gift in return, it's not a gift. It's an exchange. I give you something, you give me something. It's like going to the store. I give you $5, you give me a gallon of milk, right? That's not a gift, it's an exchange. A gift is, here's something from me to you, just because it makes me feel good. Because I like you. Don't expect anything in return. That's a gift. And it's wonderful if you get something in return. It's great. But if you're expecting it, you're not giving gifts. I just want you to think about that one. If you expect something in return for it, you're not giving gifts. Yeah. And if he doesn't have money, if he's choosing to eat rather than buy people gifts, wouldn't you prefer that? Would you prefer him not be hungry than to have a card and a flower for Christmas? What's your actual priorities? Now, I get it if he's just not caring. If it's not a choice about holidays and it's not an economic necessity, then I can understand somewhat. But my guess, it's one or the other. And at 22, it's most likely he doesn't have the money. But, so there's that.
Okay, next question. At what point did you realize it was the right time to leave your job?
When they locked the door and I couldn't get in. I'm just being funny on that one. Well, there's no set things. It's an instinct. You know when it's time. One, if they're doing things that you can't morally stand by, then it's time to leave. If they treat employees or customers or the environment or whatever in ways that you can't morally stand, it's time to move on. It just is. There's no reason to destroy your own humanity for a paycheck. One of those things is going to live with you longer, and your humanity is going to stand by you. So humanity won't feed you. Yes, it will. Your lack of humanity is one that will, in the long term, will not feed you. It will not feed your soul. Your soul is actually more important than your stomach. Well, to a point. But you'll know the signs. It's one of those things you know. If other people are leaving, it's probably time to jump ship. That's a good sign. High up middle management, people are starting to bail. That's a good sign to leave. If they're behaving in ways that are unethical, it's time to leave. If cutbacks are happening, it may be time to look for an exit door. Or if you just dread with all your fiber of your being getting up and going to that place every day, it's time to consider leaving. It may not even be nobody's fault. You just may be tired of it. But that'll eat you up too. That'll give you an ulcer. So, you have to think of your mental and physical health as well as your economic health. So, all right. Next one.
My boss asked me to write a resignation when I was unable to come to work due to anxiety, so I did, but started with per your request. He wants the per your request taken out. Should I rewrite it?
No, you shouldn't write it in the first place. Let them fire you. Make them fire you, because then it preserves your unemployment claim. What he's trying to do is say you left willingly, so therefore you're not eligible for unemployment. And you're not leaving willingly. Don't let them do it. Anxiety is they are required to give you a reasonable accommodation. They are. It's a disability. And so he's trying to get you to resign so he doesn't not on the hook for either dealing with giving you reasonable accommodations or paying you unemployment. So don't sign anything. Make him fire you. And if he does, go the unemployment route and talk to you may even want to talk to an employment lawyer, because there may be a case of not giving you reasonable accommodations without knowing your employment history. But as someone who deals with anxiety, it's easy. That's often easier to just find someone who recognizes, who can, an employer who is empathetic to your anxiety. They exist. You'll be much happier working for them than someone who doesn't want you working for them. But, the path you take is for your decision. All right, one last one.
One last one. Can a father keep his biological daughter 3 months with him permanently if the mother is against it and wants to give her up for adoption? I want both of them to stay with me, but she is reluctant.
Yes, a biological father can keep his daughter, even if the mother wants to give it up for adoption. Sadly, you may have to fight for it. You would think that if the wants to give it up for an adoption, then it would just default to go to the father, but sometimes it doesn't work like that. Now, luckily, it's already born, 3 months. And that's actually easier to do before they're born, if that decision was done before birth. Now that they're actually after birth, it's easier for a father rather than adoption. And the courts are screwy. The same woman that wants to give it up for adoption, if she decides that she wants to keep them now just because you don't. You want them. You know, the courts are weird. Courts are weird to male parents, single male parents. They just are. It's getting better, but they just are. So you're behind an eight ball if she wants to fight. At least you having custody versus her. If she just wants to put up her hands, the reason she probably, the reason she, someone in this position likely wants to give up for adoption instead of having you keep it, so they're not on the hook for child support. So if you give the child for adoption, she doesn't have to pay any child support. You keep the child, she's on the hook for child support. And so these things work. And would I like to say someone's that crass enough to give up? Well, it happens all the time. Sadly. You know, why else would you care? Unless the person's you know, not someone you want taking care of a child. But you know, I can't assume that. So assuming this is someone who should, you know, who's regularly competent about taking care of a child, you don't have to be extra competent, just have to be competent as everybody else. You know, and quite frankly, most of us aren't very competent in our first child. So you don't have to be that competent. You just have to be not a predator, essentially, right? That's essentially the level of not having your child taken from you, right? That's the standard. You have to be not neglectful or or not a predator, right? That's kind of the standard. Anything other than that, well, you still get to be a parent, man or woman or either, both, either. You know, it's not you're the parent. You're the parent, and you give. You know, and the point of giving up a child for adoption, so you're no longer the parent. She no longer wants to be the parent. And so you would think her walking away and leaving you with the child would be the default. And it should be. But my guess is that child support thing's getting in the way. So, sadly. But not all of us are made out to be parents. Some of us should have made that choice beforehand. You know, but once, you know, there comes a point of no return and you're a parent, whether you want to be or not. And adoption is a way out, I suppose. But, you know, and if you know you shouldn't be a parent, and I suppose it is a way out of causing harm.
Yes.
But when you have someone who wants to take care of that child, when you have a parent who wants to take care of that child, then just walk away. Most men won't actually ask for child support. They'll be happy to just not have to fight the court system. They won't go to child support because they don't want to deal with the court system because they'll lose. So women can literally walk away far easier than a man can. So I'm not giving much of a good answer on this, but other than yes, you can. But if she tries to fight you, it's going to be a fight. But you know what? It's your daughter. Yeah.
Yes.
I never say fight because fighting only hurts people and breaks things. But there are times when it might be necessary. Yeah. So try to avoid it. Try to deal with it. You know, say tell her you won't go for child support. You know, try to keep your promise. You know, the government if you go for like government assistance, they'll have their own say about that. But do your best. Maintain your calm. This is the one where your emotions are going to have to feed your logic to get you through this. Because if you become emotional in dealing with it, it's where men get in problems. They get emotional. So you're going to have to become logical and deal with it step by step logic. Go see a lawyer. Do all the things that you tell a woman to do in the situation. Do all that. Because it shouldn't matter. Your gender doesn't matter. We started talking about how the genders don't matter in the modern world, and the gender shouldn't matter in the modern world. It's your child. They're not interested in raising it. You are. The advice we give to women is to, get a lawyer, go to court, get your child support, and go on with your life. What do we tell men? Go to get a lawyer, go to court, and get your custody. Don't worry about child support. Why is the advice different? Don't know. Should it be that way? No, but it is. And that was not a very happy-go-lucky show today. I was hoping for a bit more of a happy show today.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. Some days aren't always happy now, are they? But we got through it. We talked about everything we wanted to talk about. I don't know if I gave good advice or good conversation or not. It's up for you all to decide. But for me and Lubby for this week, well, thank you for joining us. And please remember to, oh wait, I'm not even on the right screen here. Hold on. Where's my studio? There we are. Now we're in studio. All right, for me and Lubby, I want to thank you guys for joining us. And please remember to love everybody.